Right, the time is exactly 4 o'clock. We're going to start our webinar. Let me start by wishing everyone online on this call. I see there's a lot of people, and some of them are not even from our country. They are coming from outside our country, which is great. Thank you very much. Let me wish you a blessed and a prosperous 2022. The last 2 years has been very difficult and very challenging to all of us. This pandemic has been devastating in all fronts, in terms of health and our medical situation, and some of us have lost our loved ones. So we also convey our condolences. And then hopefully this year, if the scientists are correct, it's like we're coming to the tail end of this pandemic. Some scientists are already suggesting that maybe it will drop from pandemic to endemic, which means we will be able to live with it like any other disease. I still want to remind all of us to be careful, still wear our masks. Well, I can assure you that before this webinar, all of us were wearing our masks, and we've taken them out now because we joined this webinar. And we welcome you at WBS Leadership Dialogues. And I always want to explain the reason why we have got these dialogues. There's a lot of dialogues taking place in our nation and also on TV. And most of them are basically, if I were to use the word, stone throwing times dialogues, criticizing everyone, blaming everyone. And this one is not about blaming. This is about solution seeking, problem solving, thinking through what we need to do in order to solve some of the most pressing challenges that we face in our country, in the continent, and in the world. So that's the mindset that we have for these dialogues, because we cannot sit and watch as spectators and just comment as if we're not part. We are players in the game, and therefore that's why we invite people who are playing in the game in whatever sector they are. So it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome today Priscillah Mabelane. Priscillah, I will introduce her. Ms Priscillah Mabelane is an Executive Vice President, Energy Business, based in Johannesburg, South Africa, at Sasol, and is responsible for the upstream and downstream gas activities, as well as distribution, marketing, and sales of liquid fuels in Southern Africa. She's leading strategy formulation for energy business, which will support and steer stakeholder-centric approach in spurring sustainable growth. Let me pause there for a moment. The whole climate change debate is upon her shoulders. So she's got tremendous amount of responsibility to help us as a nation to move from high carbon economy to low carbon economy. And Sasol is well positioned to lead this transition. And the person in Sasol who's leading this transition is Priscillah. So in addition to her responsibility is securing gas. Again, gas is something that we need desperately, because we need to bridge the gap between high carbon economy to low carbon economy until all technology is in place to have cleaner energy. Gas remains a bridging gap for us. I've said this in many forums. So she's got a challenge to find the gas and making sure that the country still remain to do that, delivering renewable energy solutions to support Sasol's climate change roadmap efforts. She was appointed as a Sasol Group Executive Committee in September 2020. I know Priscillah very well. So in September 2020, this is when I retired at Sasol. So she took over from me, and I've told her many times, I told her before she joined Sasol that she cannot afford to fail. And now I'm even more convinced that she's taken over for me. I told her that she's going to do a better job than me, and I'm proud to say a year now, and she's soaring like an eagle. So she joined BP Southern Africa and she was the Chief Executive Officer of BPSA. Before that, she ran the retail operations in the UK of BP, and then before that, she was a Chief Financial Officer for BPSA for 4 years. So she's got a very well-rounded business career covering finance, operations, strategic thinking, and that's very good to have a person of that caliber in our midst. Priscillah has broad international experience and a solid corporate track record of successful leading and enabling transformation. She's very passionate about transformation. Let me pause there. Again, I've also given a big challenge, a baton of making sure that gender transformation in this industry. Some of us who've been here in this industry for 3 decades, we've been pushing transformation, but on some aspect we've succeeded, but on gender we failed. And it is her responsibility now to continue that aspect. So Priscillah, I'm putting you on the spot on this one, consciously and deliberately, as you know, me. And but she's done a lot of other things. She's been serving on boards of big organizations like Standard Bank and Vodacom. So thank you very much, Priscillah. I'll hand over to our Prof. Mills, and Prof. Mills is a seasoned facilitator, interviewer, but also has written his own book. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge it. I was looking at it right now, Mills, here in my study room here. A book on economics. Is our international business and strategy professor at WBS. Over to you, Bramils.
Thank you very much, Maurice, Director of Wits Business School. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ms Soko, Professor of International Business and Strategy at Wits Business School, and I welcome you all to this WBS Leadership Dialogue, the first of the year. Since we started this dialogue series at the beginning of last year, we have been fortunate to have been able to get to know several high-profile leaders in business and academia. It is an honor for me to be able to facilitate these conversations with so many inspiring minds. Thank you, Maurice, for introducing our guest today, Priscillah Mabelane. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I had a chat with Priscillah yesterday, and I can assure you we're going to have a fantastic conversation today. And thanks to all of you for joining us today too. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions of our guest. Please note that you have to use the chat box to write your questions or comments, and I will relay this to our guest. In case you miss anything, this event is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel. Ms. Priscillah Mabelane, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your hectic schedule to join us today.
Afternoon, Mills and Maurice. I am honored to be surrounded by the like-minded minds like yourself, and thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to it. And let me remind you, you said you'll be very nice, so yes, I look forward to that.
I'm a man of my word, and I assure you, I'm going to be very nice to you. Priscillah, perhaps to begin this conversation, I would like to talk to you about your childhood and how you grew up as a little girl, growing up in a small town of Mabocha in Limpopo. What was it like growing up during your childhood days?
Mills, thanks for that. I think first of all, I've probably told my story so many times. I always consider myself to be one of the few fortunate kids in the world to have been surrounded by a love of a family, starting with my parents, but also my grandmother, my paternal grandmother raised us. And she's just been a remarkable woman who taught us the values of who we are today, starting with prayer at 5 in the morning, happy when you're a 5-year-old or 6-year-old, but over time it gets embedded in your thinking. And also to grow up in a family where it was not about the talk. I don't remember how many times, I'll probably count how many times my parents have ever told me anything, especially my dad and grandmother. Most of the time they've lived their values. And it's something that I have really valued a lot in my career and in my personal life, to say, you say less and you act more. And whether it was issues of generosity and how they cared about the communities, and taught us that every senior person you meet on the street is your dad, is your mother, is your grandmother, you need to respect them. Those were embodied in the way that I grew up. So I've really been surrounded with love, patience, and care.
Mm-hmm. Your father had a very big influence on you, and as a 11-year-old girl, you worked as a typist for your father in his bookkeeping company, and you've said that this is where you learned diligence. Could you please just reflect for us on what it was like to work with your father, and also how that shaped your professional and your personal life?
Yeah. I think before I get into how it shaped me, but I mean, most of us we grew up in Bantu education. I studied at some point under a tree in Mabucha, and board fell, and I still have the scar to show. I always say to my kids that I had to enjoy the scar to be where I am today, but it is helpful. So when I look at my dad's life and how he's managed to raise a family of 6 and having to start from basically a bare minimum and compete in an environment which was not necessarily transformed, and what he has achieved, that's really what he was really encouraging us to do. And at that stage, I must say that it was never something that I was proud of, because he was always coming between me and my playtime. But it really taught me a lot of things. Firstly, I got to know him as an individual, and he got to also understand me and embrace me as I am, which is something that even today, the way he looked at us as his girls, because most of his 4 kids are girls, is we are able of doing anything. So he has actually encouraged that part of confidence in ourselves, that we can do anything. That's one part. The second part was the hard work that I've also embodied, like the culture part as well, has carried me throughout my whole life. Because you don't have a choice. You've got work to do, you have to deliver, and systemically I've learned from that at an early stage. Otherwise, if I don't finish what I needed to do, I can't play. Then diligence as well, which you might have heard me talk about it, because I wish it was now. I had computer, I can all delete, but if you miss a last sentence at the end of your letter or report you're typing, you start from scratch. So that taught me to always be focused, to be diligent. And I'm really grateful for that. And it's very rare that parents invested in their kids. And he's been my mentor. And it's quite interesting that even when he was ill, I had a stroke a couple of years ago, he managed to get to a flight and make sure that I was settled in the UK. Came and spent 3 weeks with me, with my mom in the UK. So these things seems to be small tokens, but they actually support you, because there's a time when you're in a new country, you're trying to establish yourself. But the fact that there's familiar people around you to encourage you, who believes in you, is quite remarkable what it can give and do to you, an individual.
And still on your childhood, Priscillah, your dream had always been to become a chartered accountant. And one can say today you're not only living your dream, but you're excelling at it. But I'm sure you'll agree with me that the path towards realizing this dream has not been easy. You must have suffered setbacks and challenges and all that. Could you please just tell us about the challenges that you've had to overcome in your career, especially in the early stages of your career as a Black woman in corporate South Africa?
Thanks, Mills. I think first of all, I like the word charter content. So it was never something that I'll say I understood what charter content used to do. I just loved it. And since I was typing, sound like the right career progression from typist to charter content. On a serious note, the challenges that I faced from an early stage have also come with opportunities. I usually say that it's amazing that my career has been shaped by a number of males. And most of those have been white, because when I started my articles at Ernst & Young, it was all white males. And I was the only, in a Pretoria Spec office, I was the only Black person there. And to be integrated into the system and get the opportunity was not that easy as well, and cultural differences as well, and how you build yourself. But through all of that, one of the things that I've learned was humility and the ability to say, guys, I'm coming from a typewriter. I don't know how to switch on a laptop. Could you please support me? Help me in navigating this and help me on how it works. And the ability to go back and saying, I'm working on these complex lines, and some of them don't want you to be on their account just because of who you are. And that's the reality of what it was in the 90s. And we need to recognize those challenges that we had to navigate. But on the other hand, they build character as well. So I think from a perspective of my growth, I really think that things have changed, but they're not necessarily changed as well. So the fact that I had an opportunity in my whole career to be able to be given content, to struggle with complex matters, real solutions, it has helped me to be where I am today. And that's what I usually say to young kids and those who are coming up, to say, don't look at problems that you're facing, look at the opportunity that they present to you. How do you convert them into things that can help you? So if you're given something that you think is not appropriate, use it to your advantage. What can you get out of it? Because we've all walked that route. We've had great opportunities, we had lousy opportunities, but it's all in our attitude.
Mm-hmm. You've held senior executive positions in various companies, both in South Africa and abroad, including Airports Company of South Africa, Ernst & Young, which you spoke about earlier, Eskom, and BP Southern Africa. How did these various stints, tenures in these senior corporate positions prepare you for the current role at Sasol?
Yeah. I think I come to the role with almost 20 years of energy experience, having spent almost a decade at Eskom and another decade at BP. So those on their own have helped me in terms of some of the technical, the commission, and the complexities of running businesses. At the same time, having worked in different spheres, I've also seen different cultures, and being able to understand as a leader, how do those shape me as an individual? And the opportunity to have worked globally and network with my colleagues and be able to benchmark. And that has helped me as well to sharpen my leadership, but also some of the commercial solutions that we continue to define and battle with as leaders. So that's probably an opportunity. On the other hand, I really think that it's not really about where you've been and how you've been. It's how have you grown? Do you have a growth mindset? And when you are in a company for 30 years or for 10 years or for 5 years, can you demonstrate that you've actually grown as an individual, and how do you utilize that opportunity to ensure that you're adding value to the organization when you're adding value to yourself? So one of my key philosophies in life is that I don't do something that I don't enjoy first, and secondly, I don't do something that does not transform someone or transform me. Because someone
right. Yeah, right. Priscilla, I want to move on to Sasol, where you are, and in your current role. I looked at the role. It's a very wide-ranging and very extensive role, and Maurice touched on that earlier. I just want to focus on one aspect of that, which is namely, delivering low carbon energy solutions to support Sasol's ambition of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. If you could elaborate on that, elaborate on the pathways. I mean, this is very ambitious, by any account. So how are you going to achieve this? What are the pathways for delivering these carbon energy solutions. And also, if you can tell us how much progress has been made to date towards fulfilling, this net zero emissions ambition.
Prof. Mills, as I said, you were going to be nice. We announced ambition in October and asking me how much progress have we made.
I'm still nice. I'm still nice.
Okay, that's fine. I think first of all, as Sasol and every South African corporate and global corporates as well, there is a strong recognition that we have to transition and decarbonize. I'm really excited about the ambition that we set ourselves to 2050, which outlines our ambition towards a net zero. And as you ask, what is our pathway to get there? The future is uncertain. I think that's the one thing we know is the future is uncertain. We have actually developed different scenarios that we are working on, but the one that we've communicated to the market, the scenario that we see is more feasible and more plausible, which we are working towards, which we're starting to demonstrate with some of the underpinning activities, is that we are going to be reducing and transitioning from coal over time. And I just want to emphasize that because we are dealing with a dual challenge of the just transition at the same time being able to provide sustainable energy solutions. If you look at Africa from an energy perspective, there's still a lot of people that don't have access to energy. We are not able to provide heat, mobility, and light to a lot of them. At some stage in the rural areas, I started using a candle, and I can see now how energy can transform that life. And all of these things have to be balanced through the transition. So the speed, but that speed needs to come with that. So our pathway basically says, as we start transitioning from coal, we'll bring in gas. And gas has better emissions, as we all know, versus 8 times better than coal. And that's probably going to take us into a stage where the sustainable energy solutions start to be more competitive. And part of that then in the long term, particularly once we see hydrogen, green hydrogen becoming more and more competitive at between $1 to $2 per kg, will then start to transition from gas to green hydrogen. And South Africa is actually very blessed with the endowments of renewables and our ability as Sasol with our Fischer-Tropsch technology, which we've actually developed over 7 decades, give us that opportunity to be able to pivot. So that strategy is science-based, is clear with some uncertainty around it. So we're quite clear that we will reduce coal. We've already made commitments to 2030. We'll reduce 10 million tons of coal and then progressively get to hydrogen, green hydrogen. So that's where we are. There are quite a number of projects that we've started, we've announced that are quite exciting, starting with where are the best areas for us or locations for us to be able to produce green hydrogen, where particularly in the Northern Cape, where we see a huge endowment when it comes to solar. And we're also looking at best wind opportunities. We're looking at areas like the Eastern Cape. So the combination of those locations, including Namibia, is what we're actually focusing on from producing green hydrogen at scale, because you can produce it anywhere else, but it's at scale. And to give it into context, we are producing gray hydrogen of about 2.4 million tons from coal for our utilization in Secunda to produce different products, being fuels and chemicals. So we're going to need something similar to that. So that's the large scale we're looking at. At the same time, we see the global shift also giving South Africa an opportunity to pivot into renewable sources and to be able to export that. And the best way to do that, as you'll know, is through hydrogen converted into ammonia for now. And those are the opportunities we're driving. In South Africa, we decided as Sasol that we're going to break this chicken and egg issue around how do we start driving the penetration of green economy in the country, especially for the hard-to-abate industries. So you've seen we've announced a number of applications that we're already prioritizing. Our CEO has also announced that by 2023, we'll be producing some sort of green hydrogen in Sasolburg. And those investments are ongoing, and we are working with different partners, a number of them, and I have a team and also with some of my colleagues leading on this initiative. So it's quite an exciting space. But in a nutshell, what it actually says is that for us to deliver the future, we have to deliver today. So how do we make sure that we run the current Sasol in the most efficient way, generate sufficient cash flows to be able to finance our future investments. At the same time, ensure that we are actually continuing to develop the economy in Southern Africa, particularly my portfolio. When I look at Mozambique, where we're participating, when I look at South Africa, so our social economic impacts are also critical in our journey towards the transition.
Mm-hmm. I'll talk more about the socio-economic impact because there's a lot of interest in that based on the questions we've received. I've noted that there is a question in the chat box, which I'll come to shortly from Segi Kistasamy. I'll come to that question shortly, and I would like to invite other participants in this webinar. If you have a question, please type it in the chat box, and I'll relay to Priscilla. But before we take Segi's question, I want to ask you this question, Priscilla, about an ideal energy mix, the sort of in context. It's a big debate that has been raging. In your view, what would be an ideal energy mix for South Africa? Does nuclear energy, for example, have a role to play? There's been a debate involving the Minister of Minerals and Energy, whose name I will not mention, Gwede Mantashe, who has been sort of caught in this battle with his critics, over whether South Africa should maintain the use of coal in its energy, especially following the the offer that was made at the United Nations Climate Conference in Glasgow, where South Africa was offered a loan to phase out its dependency on coal. So this has been this has been going to and fro. It's a very interesting debate, and I wanted to hear what your view is on that. Starting with the ideal energy mix in your view, and your view also on the battle that has pitted the Minister of Minerals and Energy against his critic.
I think people will argue different and debate differently. And let me tell you where my personal view first, and I'll tell you about Sasol. I really believe that South Africa is blessed with different endowments. We have the mineral resources. At the same time, we have the endowments of renewables. To transition from one to the next, it requires significant investments. At the same time, we understand the economic challenges and crises that the country is facing. And it's not only us. So if you go and review a number of the NDC, the nationally determined contributions that all countries have developed, fossil fuel plays a critical role in the transition. And so as we do that, coal will play a role. Mining companies that are currently mining coal will transition, but over a period of time, and the commitment is there. Equally so, you've seen Eskom's transition from coal to renewables over time. It will be at the same level, and gas will play a role. I suppose the question that we need to really discuss is, how do we balance this dual challenge of ensuring that we deliver on our NDC, which I really believe that Minister Mantashe is part of the cabinet that signed off on that, and they're committed to that. It's been endorsed, the country is driving it, and companies are driving it. So from that perspective, I don't believe there's a conflict, unless you want to create a conflict. It's just how you look at it. We can argue about the pace and how fast we go. All of these issues need to be addressed. I don't think anyone else actually asking and actually belittling the just transition imperatives vis-a-vis the need for us to decarbonize. And that's really what I hear most of the time when I listen to what Parliament is saying, when I read the policies that are formal, that are out there, that are being implemented. And when I look at how we're being supported by the DMRE and other ministries and policies in driving our own GHG agenda and our NDC. So from that perspective, I'm really comfortable that the challenges that we need to face and wrestle with as a country is what we should be dialoguing around. It's how do we get cheaper funding to do research and technology, to make sure that the new technologies we need, such as direct air capture, which is going to be an important source of carbon in the future, are invested in. How do we make sure that we're creating economies and we can turn the secunda over time to become a different industry? So that industrialization strategy and what it embeds, and really upskilling. So these are the things that I feel we are not debating. We are not developing plans to address. We're dealing into areas which the conflict is not going to change the lives of our kids. So my request is, let's focus on those challenges. And this is where Sasol, we've actually said that in this mix of energy, we will have all of the efficient energies, and we're balancing both economic and plant imperatives as equal.
I have two questions from
and I'm not going to comment, sorry, Mills, I'm not going to comment about anything about nuclear because I'm not an expert, and I try and refrain from things I don't understand. All I said is that any renewable energy needs to be assessed, and we need to maximize our endowments in the transition. Yeah,
no, that's very clear. I've got a question from Segi Kistatsami, and the question is, what are your views on the future of South Africa's remaining and ailing refineries, lagging fuel quality versus imports Euro 4 specification? I'm not sure if can you take another question, or should we want to deal with that first? There's another question.
No, you can bring another one.
Another one, okay. This one is from Ms Mabelane, an alumnus of Wits Business School. Thank you for your participation, Zwelake. We appreciate this. And the question is, the biggest challenge of the energy transition is not financial capital, it's human capital. That is a quote from the Financial Times. And the question is, to what extent does the energy transition present a human capital challenge for South Africa? And what is Priscillah's leadership view on this, and what solutions does the WBS have for this emergent risk? I think Maurice can speak on behalf of the WBS. All right.
I'll come back to Zwelake. He also doesn't tell you that he's an ex-BP, so it's good to see that protege of my ex-employees, because I still feel connected to BP in a way. Starting with the issue about refineries, I think the reality, which as South Africa we also need to face, is as the world starts to decarbonize and the global players are starting to look about where they're going to be playing, investment in small refineries are going to become more and more challenging. There are currently very few of them, if not all, are economically competitive and viable, especially with lower, in an environment where you have lower crude prices. So when you then look at that, and as leaders, and you think about where do you best allocate your resources during the transition? Do you go and reinvest in refineries that are going to be closed out over time? Or should you start thinking about sustainable businesses into the future? And I think that's a reality that South Africa is facing. And as a result of that, we will see a close down of refineries. I think we've already seen it, unfortunately, accelerated by the incident with Engine. And a number of those will come through as well, because you just can't run a business that is not competitive. There are global refineries that have huge scale, and you have to ensure that you're making money and margins out of this. Then, having said that, our Secunda refinery is different. So its challenge is the decarbonization agenda, but it remains one of the well-invested refinery over time, with the ability to ensure security of supply. Then the question that government needs to start thinking about is which refineries are going to probably remain for 10 years, 20 years? And what are the policies that we need to put in place to make sure that we don't destabilize the South African economy and depend solely on imports, whilst it might be competitive at some stage, the security of supply, the geopolitics, the weather in terms of how you offload products into the country. And these are the complexities that I hope that as an industry we're addressing. I saw that our fund is on the line. And I know these are the issues that the industry is wrestling with. And we need to help government to develop those solutions and not necessarily be naive that the change is going to come and it will be accelerated. So that's how I see the future of refineries, and it's a matter of time. In terms of the crude refineries, by the way, that's what I meant. Just in terms of just transition and what does it really mean? I agree that at a global space, the human capital is probably one of the biggest risks that we have. But we should not also underestimate the challenges of developing countries when it comes to financial capital, because the cost counts as well. If you just compare us, for example, to Chile or Australia for us to compete in exportation of green hydrogen or green ammonia, our cost of capital is extremely high, and it makes us anti-competitive. And those are some of the challenges that as a country we're facing, which will ordinarily then bring more reserves into the country to boost the economy. But when it comes to issues of human capital, this is where the higher education plays a critical role. And I'm going to give that back to you, Mels, is that we really have to start anticipating what are this new skill set that we need. Are we teaching kids the right skills, or is your curriculum still the same as what Priscillah learned 30, 40 years ago? My daughter's 31. So is it the same? Or how did we pivot it? And how are you partnering with others to be able to make sure that we can really accelerate the learnings? We've just looked at the matric results coming out. We're all excited about bachelor's degrees. What about artisans? How are we supporting that development of the artisans, technologists that we're going to be able to need to be able to fast track that economy? Construction becomes quite important. If you look at where some of the endowments are, I was in the Northern Cape recently, and how do you deploy resources from the developed inland to a province where most of the activities over time will have to migrate to that? And I think this is where the Just Transition Plan, with emphasis on human capital, skills development, and how we reskill, it will be important. I think we're talking a lot about that. We don't necessarily have substantial plans that should make us proud and competitive as well.
All right. Did you want to say anything, Maurice?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think the challenge of human capital is real. There's no doubt about it. And Wits Business School has seen this challenge, in fact, a decade ago. And we started working on establishing the African Energy Leadership Center. And right now it is fully functional. And it's a program that is aimed at producing leaders, particularly, that are going to be understanding all the value chains of the energy industry, whether it's electricity, whether it is gas, whether it's fossil fuels, but the complexity and integration, and also have a view to take it in this transformation in a complex situation we're finding ourselves. So we do have the capacity, and we continue to develop it. And if you want to know more about the Africa Energy Leadership Center, you're welcome to contact our director, Loazi. He's probably in this webinar. But I don't want to take Priscillah's time and talk about WBS. Let's rather listen on Priscillah. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Maurice, and thank you for those answers, Priscillah. Now, I want to stay with the theme of the just energy transition, and this is a question that has to do with the dominant market power of all majors and the concerns about inclusivity and equity in the energy industry. And so the question is, what impact do you think the just energy transition will have on the dominant market power of the oil majors? And what opportunities do you think this will introduce in terms of leveling the playing field for SMEs? For example, by making the liquid fuel industry more inclusive and competitive. And still on this theme of integrating small businesses into your business, I received a question, Priscillah, which harps on this from it is an email this morning. Koliwe Motsipe. She worked at Sasol. And she left Sasol, but now she is ventured into a business as an entrepreneur. And she says, I'm a startup entrepreneur in the energy business and have already started, but at the moment, I'm looking for clients, of which it is my biggest challenge as a distributor. I would truly appreciate it if I can learn something from today's webinar as a Black woman who wants to penetrate the male-dominated industry. Perhaps you could combine both questions. There's a lot of interest about how emerging entrepreneurs can, can take advantage of the opportunities that will be created by the just energy transition and what those opportunities are. What are those opportunities?
Thanks, Mels. I think, first of all, those who have listened to me talk, especially at ULP, when I talk about opportunities for women in a male-dominated environment, is that the energy transition brings a lot of opportunities. I mean, I've just spoken about renewables, which is a sector that is still at its infancy. And when you look at the endowments that we have, and my team reminded me that we've got about 40 gigawatt of installed capacity. So in versus 2050, a fivefold growth as we drive green hydrogen for local and external consumption, as we pivot secunda and we start producing greener products. So all of these things brings opportunities along the value chain. Some are existing skills in terms of civil works, construction, but you start getting into new technologies, battery storage technologies. I spoke earlier on about direct air capture. At the same time, we've got components that can be produced. We are really blessed with endowments in the PGM mines, which gives us a huge opportunity to start thinking about fuel cell technology and what it looks like and what kind of businesses and industries can we formulate over time. This requires innovation, skills, and drive. So at times, I usually say to people that I really struggle when we sit back and saying, I want to be an entrepreneur, because it's not about tenderpreneur. So what's your value proposition to my business? I'm here talking about our problems. How do you help me solve our problems rather than come and tell you that this is what I need from you? So we need to change our mindset and become value adding. So we're looking for that innovation, entrepreneurial spirit to hear that Sasol is going to decarbonize. We need to be able to ensure that we're creating new industries. We can produce different components as a country. Where do you play? What's your strategy? What is the approach? How do you help South Africa resolve those challenges and take advantage of the just transition? Because in that space, then there will be more players because the playing fields are leveled. But again, if it's not well thought through, those who are investing resources and time will over time scale up, and there will always be major players. So I think those are the opportunities that I see. Of course, legislation will also play a role, particularly when it comes to women inclusion and how we develop and how we support going forward. And companies are committed to that. As Sasol, we are committed to that. But I just really want to encourage, especially those with aspiration, to say diversity, inclusion, and broadening the economic participation, it's going to be a dual responsibility. Personal drive and culture and change in the organizations and government.
All right, I have a question from Sivuyise Nzeni. What strategic pillars have been or are being adopted by various countries who are successful in building the market for energy transition like green hydrogen? That's Sivuyise. And let me see if I have another question. There's a lot of interest in this conversation, and you're also receiving a lot of love here. People saying they love your positive attitude, and they admire your leadership. So it's very good to see that. And the other question is from Tandogazi. What development policies could the country adopt to ensure this energy transition, particularly in the renewable energy sphere and energy storage, benefits our country? Yeah. Some of these you've already touched on, yes, but perhaps you could elaborate.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest points and touches on the first question you've asked. So if you look at most countries, most of them have already articulated their NDCs, where they're going and how they're going to support that from a policy framework, as well as investments. The reality that the world is facing is that energy transition is going to be extremely expensive. As we've seen with renewables, they've probably now gone down between 60 and 70% in terms of where they were in the beginning. It's every technology you implement until the learning curve is in, the scale is in, it's quite costly. So during that transition, how do governments, through incentives and policies, support and accelerate the transition? It's going to be the crux of the best countries that are going to win. And in that, it requires a social compact. So, and that's what we're seeing globally. If you look at other countries I've mentioned earlier on, Australia, I've mentioned Chile, they've got a hydrogen strategy that is well articulated with clear milestones and plans. And that's where the strategic partnership between private sector and the public sector becomes quite important. And this is where, from a Sasol perspective, we are really ensuring that we learn from how we were formed. Think about Sasol 7 decades ago, when the energy security of energy for South Africa was at risk, and innovation was at the heart of how it was formed, but it was government-led. So we still have those institutions that we are strategically partnering with, because that's what it's going to take. But I think South Africa needs to have a clear strategy. We know that the Minister Patel and the Minister Madash as well are together working on a hydrogen commercialization of a hydrogen plan. We've seen the Northern Cape that we are very excited to partner with, already announcing their entire strategy as well for the Northern Cape, given the endowment in terms of renewables. But there has to be a holistic plan with the enablements. Earlier on, we spoke about skills transfer. We spoke about what jobs are we going to create? How do we create them? And further, how do we make sure that we've got the right policies? Issues of land, water availability. All of these opportunities brings challenges to them. So it needs a coherent policy framework to accelerate it.
I want to talk about issues of socio-economic change. Now, Priscilla, you know, because I received a number of questions on this theme, the issue of social justice, whether, you know, systemic racial injustice or inequality or poverty, you know, do you think that companies such as Sasol have a role to play in tackling social justice issues? And if you perhaps can highlight, you've already made some reference to this, but maybe elaborate on the other practical programs that or initiatives that Sasol has implemented, you know, to contribute towards tangible socio-economic transformation. And one of the questions I received this morning is from Mandla Mkhwanazi, which is based on this theme, and it says, what is Sasol's contribution in dealing with youth unemployment and poverty in the areas in which the company operates? So I think we can take that along the main question that I've asked.
I think there's a lot that we do. First of all, from a principal perspective, companies don't operate in a void. We're part of the society. Our customers are from the society. Our sustainability into the future is depending on how our society is going to evolve. And the more their lives are bettered, the more successful we're going to be. So that's a principle that we've adopted. Secondly, we also realize that issues of social justice are not necessarily just legislative and compliance. We have to make a meaningful contribution. So we have clarity of strategy from a social perspective, especially in terms of the initiatives. We've got the Sasol Foundation that is actually looking at not only donating, but how do we support entrepreneurs? The other day I went to address a team of female entrepreneurs in engineering that are starting to look at opportunities with our procurement team. If you look at our level 1 score, from a procurement perspective, we are contributing and ensuring that we are engaging local companies, particularly our fence line communities where we operate. So that's the strategy, and the programs are implemented around that. We emphasize in transfer of skills. If you have a BE company coming in, the engineering capabilities they're bringing in, how do we transfer skills to the youth? Someone spoke about the youth. because we are employing them, but we can't only employ them. We have a lot of our spend that sits with our partners, the contractors. So how do we make sure that we've got those policies, procedures, and processes to manage and assess the impact on that? And that's what we're engaging on. And we report on it in our annual report on an annual basis. And let's give you another example. In Mozambique, we went in Mozambique to start developing gas about 17 years ago, so before I joined. I have been extremely encouraged to see we've already now we are developing a training center, because we recognize that one of the challenges that we are faced with for the sustainability of our business is technical skills. And how do we make sure that we are continuously developing the communities around that area to be able to ensure that we can employ them over time and train them? But I was talking to my team and I said, it's not only about our industry. You have Vodacom in Mozambique, you have other companies in Mozambique. How do we make sure we are impactful in training more than what we need for the country to be able to, some can be entrepreneurs, because we can't absorb everyone else. We've got economic challenges and resource challenges as well that we need to be cognizant of. And we're also looking at other social things such as hospitals, etc. But for me, the fundamental thing is wherever we operate, we have to make sure that we transfer skills, we give people equal opportunities, we are inclusive, and we can measure meaningful contribution to the society we operate within. And I'm really proud of what we do. We have just gone through a transformation with our employees. At the back of that, we put a platform to be able to enable them to transition into businesses if they can't be employed. And that's what a meaningful company does.
I would like to talk, before we move on to the next themes of corporate transformation and leadership, if you could just tell us, looking forward, based on what you've said about Sasol and the operations and the energy industry broadly, where do you see Sasol in the next, say, 20 to 30 years? What will a Sasol of the future look like?
I think, first of all, it's going to be more greener. My aspiration at that stage is that you can come and buy your points from us from a green perspective. So we will definitely be producing and selling sustainable products, chemicals and fuels or energy solutions. That's one aspect of it. We will be more dynamic and more inclusive. I think the reality is I'm too old probably. If I just look at in December, I spent time with my 8-year-old nephew who was teaching me how to Google and do all sorts of things. It's that digital world that we're getting into, different thinking. So the future Sasol employees will be representative of the South African economy. There will be more women in roles. We will not be talking about one Priscillah and then we celebrate that person, which is very sad. So that's what we are aspiring and working towards. Our communities will continuously to relate to our brand and will become even more and more, not only a Southern Africa brand, but broadly, even globally. We're going to new countries like Namibia. So every African will resonate and agree to that brand and what it actually means for us. So what we need to recognize is that the world is going to change. We're going to go into cities. Behaviors of our customers are changing, and we'll be able to meet all of them.
All right. There's Sabelo Tanjana. Wow, Priscillah is always clear, great leader. Mahalia Masilela, a great leader indeed. Thank you, Priscillah. Now, let me talk to you about transformation, corporate transformation. I know this is an issue that you feel very strongly about, you're passionate about. How would you characterize the state of transformation in the corporate world in South Africa since 1994? And perhaps, comment also on the point that was raised earlier by Maurice about the issue of gender representation, the underrepresentation of female, senior female executives in the corporate world. What in your view accounts for this situation, and what needs to be done to address the problem of underrepresentation of women in senior executive positions? But before you focus on the gender issue, I would like you to look broadly, your view of where we are since 1994, broadly in the corporate world in South Africa, and then we can move on to the specific issue of gender.
Yeah, thanks, Mills. I'm going to be controversial. It's extremely disappointing. And those who have heard me comment now and then, I usually look, and my sister went to Van der Merwe, and we were looking at the results of the Van der Merwe school in Lubachum, which is one of the public schools. And you look at some of the top students, you've got Black females there, Black guys coming in. And the reality is, if we continue to perpetuate a situation like we've done over the years, where we don't deepen the experience of our youth and our technically young Africans, coloreds, women, we're going to struggle. And it's good to talk about meritocracy. Meritocracy plays a critical role, but you can only be competent if you're given an opportunity to grow. Someone has taken a risk on me to be where I am today. And that's the part that worries me about South Africa of today and where we are in corporates. And we circulate the few heads and few people we know. We should look at our talent pipeline, understand and be purposeful about it. I always say that one of my inspirational leaders was Bob Bradley at BP, who used to say, in every country we operate within, there will be representation, and I would like those companies to be run by the locals that are competent. And he lived that strategy, and I'm one example of that. And unless there's that purposeful leadership, and it's not a compliance agenda, we will struggle to transform. And the consequences could be significant. At times you look at the social issues and you wonder, to what extent do we play a role? I previously went to Ireland, and it was run by a woman. I always have a passion about the women leaders. She's the CEO there of Vodafone. And she had the Paris principles as you enter their offices. And she was talking about gender violence and saying to us as leaders to think that when a country has 1/3 of its employees, so 1/3 of its count of the women in the country are actually subjected to gender violence. To think that in my team, I don't have those perpetrators, I'll be naive. To think that my team are not victims, I'll be naive. And these are the realities that corporate South Africa needs to recognize. If you build culture in an organization, you need to take into consideration the external factors. And the more we can improve on that in inclusivity, culture, appreciation, the more we'll accelerate that. What do we need to do in terms of creating more opportunities for women? And I don't want to generalize, and it comes back again to culture. People thrive and grow in a culture that recognizes their contribution. And as leaders, we need to recognize that the best assets we have and our diamonds and that we are, it's our people. And right. How do we support that, and how do we make sure we set the ambition, the policies, the procedures? In BP we used to have something called rules of the road, and my team used to work around them, by the way. And then I'll send them back. They come back and saying, we've interviewed 5 women and 5 males, we're taking this male. But on the other hand, when I asked them, but the women scored 5, all of the males scored between 20 and 25, it was out of 25. How can you say there was meritocracy? Go back and look for a woman who scored 21, and then let's have a conversation. It takes purpose, intentional leadership to make it work. And then on the women's side, they need sponsors. They also need to speak up.
All right, thank you. 2 questions, one from Anastasia. What is Sasol? Go ahead.
Now saying I apologize.
No, I'm the one who's supposed to apologize. I interrupted you while you're speaking. So Anastasia, what is Sasol's approach to ESG reporting? That is Anastasia. And then there's another question which Okay, this is from Karabo, Harry. Karabo says, REIPP is considered one of the best energy transition programs worldwide. However, most local companies are not benefiting owing to the capex related to the development of energy projects to financial close. How do energy startups in energy even compete? FSPs are averse to funding SMEs in any industry. What is Sasol's stance on such matters?
Wow, that's a difficult one. I think I'll struggle to answer it. But I think first of all, as I've mentioned, that we've got, as part of our Sasol Foundation, we also put forward a funding mechanism where we fund different initiatives. And we've recently asked ourselves to say, how do we make sure that we're adapting in that the funding that we give to entrepreneurs and SMEs to the just transition route and how we move forward? That's the reality of what we're faced with. And again, I don't think this is an easy and simple to say Sasol. It is a market challenge. And one of the things that we formed and really created was the Energy Council. Because in the Energy Council, we realized that for us to be able to raise issues of access to funding, access to capital, we have to work as industry to be able to drive those, because not one single company can afford to stimulate the whole economy on their own. And Sasol is not a funder, we're not a bank, but when we're starting to have strategic initiatives with frameworks that can actually support that as an industry, and we bring all our demands together, and we work with the department of the different departments in government, particularly economic development, we can find mechanisms to fund all of this. Having said that, there are companies that are not as startups, have been funded by the IDC. We are working with them as Sasol. We are supporting them on the technology side. We are partnering with CSIR to look at those opportunities. And when they are viable, we are funding them. In my existing business as it sits before the just transition, we are looking for digital solutions. And when the team goes out to market to source for that and find companies that are able to be innovative and develop that, we will support them. We'll give them the necessary support and work closely with them. It's the appropriateness of the solutions, but this is the broader issue that needs an industry solution. And I wish I had an answer for it, and I don't. And I struggle with it personally. So I think that's what I will leave it there and just say, these are things that, as I mentioned, to say, we need a strategy, we need a plan, we need to start committing to it with government in partnerships, because if we expect government to unlock this value, it's not going to happen. And if government expects the private sector to unlock it, it's not going to happen. It's a responsibility that we need to drive and really invest in it. It takes time, passion, but bankable solutions that we can work with.
All right, and the question about ESG reporting, what's your approach to that from Anastasia?
Again, Anastasia, I'm not an expert and can put you in touch with our people, but from an executive perspective, we are very clear that one of the things that we're really proud of is transparency. And we've won a number of awards in terms of our reporting approach. So if you look at our integrated report, it's extremely comprehensive on our initiatives, our targets, we benchmark ourselves, and where we have the gaps, we articulate where the gaps are going to be. And you've seen that we've also recently been detailed about our climate change agenda. How are we going to move from the 10% that we've previously articulated to the 30%? What underpins that? Where are we falling short, and how do we benchmark ourselves? And it'd be good to know if there are areas that she sees as she reads our integrated reporting that she thinks we can enhance further. Our website has got more and more information as well. So we're continuously looking for further improvements, but we've got a team that is really dedicated to make sure that we are in line with best practice. And to give an example, there are areas that we realize that we haven't really been working on, such as when you look at our gas, how do we make sure that we are measuring not only the emissions from a gas perspective, but we start to understand how we're going to be reducing our releases, methane releases, etc. So some of the targets that we haven't set in the past, and we are starting to challenge ourselves to say, how do we set the targets? How do we make sure we can articulate them? So there's always continuous improvement in our processes.
Mm. What kind of a leader are you, Priscillah? How would you describe yourself as a leader? So what would be the sort of the defining attributes of your leadership approach, and how do you how do you interact with those who work under you, those that you lead? How would you describe that?
It's very difficult to describe myself.
Still on that, before let me just get, excuse me, I want to link it to a question from Hadibolaye Ditha, who is asking, what is your view on recognizing potential as a leader? Is the value in recognizing potential in women and giving them an opportunity?
Yeah, that's
excuse me.
And I'm biased when it comes to that, Khadi, and I'll come back and respond to that. I think when we come to the issues of who am I, it's very difficult. Hopefully my team can type anyone who's worked for me. So I really don't know. What do I aspire to be? I think first of all, it's a value-driven individual. So for me, authenticity is quite important. So I only work for companies, keep friends with people that my values and theirs are aligned. And that's quite important. I really enjoy sleeping very well at night. And so I make value-based decisions as much as I can. That's one thing. The other part is humility. And this is what my grandmother taught, is every person has a value to add in your life, whether it's a security that you meet at the gate to the most successful person. And I always believe that we're going to leave our boxes because they don't define who we are. And I don't ever want anyone to respect me because they respect my box, because it's just not me. The box is the box, and I'm the individual that is fortunate to be given someone have taken a risk on me to occupy that box. So that's one element that I look at. How do I interact with my team? I'm very driven. And I push boundaries. My mind works hard. I'm running in the morning, solutions comes to my mind. And I struggle at times with people who are slow. So it's one area of growth because I really want that part deliver and underpin and continuous improvement. So that's how I think how my team will probably describe me. But at the same time, really allow people to make mistakes, because that's how I've been. I'm where I am today. I carry loads and loads of mistakes, and I don't see them as regrets. I see them as opportunity for growth. And if I don't give people opportunities and really stretch boundaries for them to grow, then people will never become better. And that's what I always strive to do every day with anyone I interact with, is to push boundaries, make sure that you're applying yourself and growing as an individual. Potential, I'm conflicted because I'm probably one of the beneficiaries of a potential. Because if you ask me to say in Eskom, when Dr. Willem Gok, who was a CFO, gave me an opportunity to work in multidisciplinary areas, was it all because I had demonstrated performance? I'll say no. They could see the drive and the potential, and they invested in me. But it comes with responsibility and accountability and huge, huge expectations. If anyone is going to invest in you, you need to return back. And it's in every company I've been to, in BP, even here, I'm sure there are other people who could fill this role. Someone has to take a risk on someone else, even if we say meritocracy, because really in an interview, that's all you can assess. It's how well I'm articulative. And then you take a risk on someone's potential of what they've articulated. So it's imperative for companies to do that. But to do that, you have to be able to understand your business. You have to understand people. You have to make time to engage and understand that. And some people are just comfortable as solid people, solid performers. Some have a huge potential to get somewhere else if they're given an opportunity to be stretched. And honest feedback is important.
All right. So I have a question from somebody here, Moro. Green hydrogen in 2023 at Sasol Bank. What's the envisaged price point? Very technical question. What's the envisaged price point, volume of production, assumptions for rollout of supporting infrastructure, and is it for own consumption or for local and export markets, please?
It's a small scale. I'm not going to disclose price sensitivity and so competitiveness.
I think
the advantage. We've got advantage assets which we're going to utilize, and we've spoken about that. The intention of that project, and it's starting with 20, scale up to 60 megawatts quickly, was to stimulate the South African green economy from an application. So you've seen we've announced our partnership with Toyota, Imperial, and others, because the heavy duty mobility, the green steel, are those that we are already targeting, and also in mining. So we want to actually utilize this with our partners, and we're entering into partnerships. IDC is investing in this project jointly with us, and that will be a first start to have a use case that we can learn from and ensure that we're actually starting to broaden and deliver at scale. At the same time, we've also announced sustainable aviation fuels production at Secunda, which we're trying to look at targeting exports globally. And that is going to be subjected to how we compete and how, if we are successful in terms of the HU Global platform that we are trying to bid into. And if we are, then we'll also be able to test sustainable aviation fuel and be able to, over time, scale up. And we've also articulated our ambition together with Gauteng to make OR Tambo a hub for sustainable aviation fuel. So those are the opportunities we are driving in. So whatever we are doing, it's not for our own consumption. It's really to make sure that we're starting to stimulate the market.
Okay, a controversial question from Goodwin, right? And is fracking a viable option in the Karoo, given the environmental degradation it poses?
I'm going to excite him and say no answer to that. It's not my area of expertise. Yeah. And to be honest, I'm not qualified to answer that. It's not a business we're in.
Right. And the other one from Karab is, what's the future of energy security for Africa outside of the Western influence?
It's very difficult to think that there is a Western influence and there's an African influence. We have to recognize that we're operating in a global world, which is connected. And our value proposition have to be extremely clear. Access to markets have to be both local and global. So if there are policies that are not enabling us to be competitive, or for us to be to reassess assert our position as Africa, then we need to address those. So I always find it quite difficult when we look at issues of us and the Western and all of this. There's no country in this globe that can operate, especially now, in isolation and be successful.
Right. Now, I want to look at as we move towards the conclusion of our conversation, this last part. We've had this outstanding, stellar career, and surely there must have been moments when you thought, wow, this is fantastic. I'm really, really proud of myself. And when I look back, I've done this very well. What would you say are the key highlights of your career? When you look back over the years, the companies you worked for and where you are today, if you were to identify those, what would those be?
It's quite difficult to say, and I need to think about it, because everywhere I've worked, I've enjoyed what I'm doing. I've made a difference in people's lives, in the companies I've worked for, and for myself only. Otherwise, I leave. I only do things, as I said, that transforms lives, that transforms me. So every opportunity has made me a better person. I've had deep learnings in every company I've worked for in different ways. Some pleasant, some unpleasant, but that's the nature of growth, which I've actually embraced. So from that perspective, I'll just say I'm extremely fortunate. Have I had failures? Of course, even when I was studying, I'm one of those people who had a child at an early age. And I'm glad that I did, because she's now 30 and I can retire soon. So every opportunity and setback has come with a growth. And part of this is also having to lose our husband at an early stage. You learn from it. You become independent in a way. You get strength as an individual, but you also build solid systems and friends and people to support you, and you grow as such. So I think what I'm trying to say is that it's very difficult for me to say this was better than that, because every career served a purpose in my life at a point in time and has made me a better person. The scars and challenges I've experienced in my career. And I'm still experiencing them here in Sasol, because that's what it is. Leadership is tough. I'm making me a better person every day. I grow as an individual and I make lots of mistakes as such. It's just a humility to know that you can only be successful through others and with others, not as an individual.
There are quite a few messages here which about Mozambique, very positive. Community developments in Mozambique have been very impactful. Truly proud of you and truly proud of that. That is from Boitumelo. And then there's another one from Douglas. Douglas says, great work you guys are doing in Mozambique, giving young people training on technical skills to work in the renewable energy industry. I think we need more of that in South Africa. Would you like to comment on that and perhaps say a few words about your operations there in Mozambique and the business environment? How is it going there?
I mean, Mozambique is one of the countries with so much potential. It's just really incredible, the potential that is there, but yet left behind from an economic perspective. And as Sasol, and I've inherited most of this from my predecessors, we have really created a solid business and we continue to grow it. We are now looking at further opportunities of expanding on the southern side. We want to bring in LNG and working with partners through Matola, and all of those initiatives are progressing. But why are we successful in Mozambique? Two things for me that stand out. First is our relationship with government, like we are doing in South Africa. We have a very, very respectful and strong partnership with government. And we challenge and we dialogue, and they hold us accountable, but they also support us as such. So that's very important. So we do beyond the policies. And if the policies needs to be enhanced, we look at the best standards and we bring them into that. And then we have a fantastic team. But like here, they still need to deepen their skills and we need to work with them. Some is through the training. But I always believe that 70% of that is at work. Is how do we give people experiential learning, coach support? It takes a lot of detailed investment, and I'm really blessed to have a team. My entire leadership spine of Mozambique is behind it. They are committed. They drive it with passion. They are on the ground, and they continue to rotate, support. So it's really exciting, and I'm really glad and excited about the opportunity to not only transform Sasol, because gas is going to be part of Sasol's future and becomes more and more so as Maurice said. So that's one of the things that keeps me awake at night. But to see how we're transforming Mozambicans' lives and how we continuously change their lives, it's just remarkable. And to be honest, I think I'm indebted for such an opportunity to really, it's humbling for an individual.
You spoke about the key highlights in your career. I would like to talk about you have achieved tremendous success, and that is very clear to see. But when you look back over the years, you must also have made mistakes. After all, we're all human. Made mistakes. Suffered setbacks, had regrets. Can you reflect on these? Some of these. What mistakes have you made, and what setbacks have you suffered, and what regrets do you have about your career so far?
I usually struggle with regrets because I tried to live a positive life. My dad has really instilled that in me, that hey, life is too short for me to be regretting. I look at opportunity and the growth of every scenario I go through. I mean, I've actually managed at an early age of my life to fail. And I mentioned the other day that I failed once in my life, and it was a painful learning. And in my career, I've made lots of mistakes. Let me just start as being a woman. Give an example there. It's quite extremely challenging to work in a male-dominated environment, and that's what I've been throughout my career. And you make a lot of assumptions, and at times those assumptions drive your thinking about people. But even if the assumptions are correct, how you respond as an individual is more important than how people are responding and how they're feeling. I always say, when you find two people struggling in the mud, you don't know who's right or wrong. And that's what I've learned. And I've had to make a lot of adaptation as an individual to grow. To basically say, does it really matter what Mills thinks about me? Do I have to work 3 times as hard to prove that a Black person is capable? Or should I just enjoy what I'm doing and do my best so that my work will contribute to that? Recently, the issue of mental health and exhaustion is something that I've always undermined. I speak about it, but I have boundaries, and at times I relax those boundaries. So I was ill in December. So I went to COP, came back from the UK with a para-influenza. And I have no doubt that this thing would not have taken me almost my entire holiday of 4 to 6 weeks if I had throughout the year paced myself, rested when I was on holiday, and recharged, because my body would have been able to fight this influenza. And I spent my whole Christmas with my family sick. So these are some of the things that I'm taking as learnings to say, we need to take care of ourselves. Issues of mental health, especially with COVID. Who do we talk to? Reaching out to some of my friends who have lost their loved ones and being there for them. And it's not the same when you're doing it virtually or on WhatsApp until you see the person face to face. So those are some of the learnings that I'm taking continuously. And I know now, and my EA Malibelo knows, that I need to have a better life. I need to switch off. And when I'm on holiday, I need to be on holiday, because the world that I operate with requires me energized, and my team requires me healthy and energized. So this is continuous learning that I have.
All right. Before I ask you our final question, there's an intriguing question that I want to pose from Peladi Mohlala. And she says, taking into consideration what you just said about how you grew up, we have what we call seriti in African families. And she says, I'm not sure what it's called in English, seriti. Our families have seriti, but we also have individual seriti, which increases as we do good and contribute to the betterment of our community. How can we improve our organization's seriti so that we can build a positive leadership, reputation, and do business that matters, right? Do you think the combined seriti for Sasol is significant, and can it help with the energy transition, and how? If not, what values and what do you think are crucial to consider as leaders of this country? So it's a very multifaceted question, but I think you get the gist.
You assume I do, but let me try my best. I think at times we talk about companies, we forget that companies are on paper. It's a corporate formation on paper. Company is the people. And if we don't have the purposeful minds and hearts beyond ourselves, our employees don't have that, that seriti will never be recognized. So it's really about how do we create a culture where we embrace contribution to society beyond oneself.
All right, so the last question, if there are no further questions on the chat box, we have 5 minutes to go. So that would be, the key lessons. There are so many, just looking at the comments and how inspirational this conversation has been for the participants here, and how they admire you and really appreciate your leadership approach and your authenticity. Surely there's a lot of people who want to become like you, or even excel, do better than you, but you are a really inspirational leader. And for those who come after you, the next generation of business executives, what lessons do you think you have learned that you would impart to them? What key lessons have you learned in your corporate career, and what do you think they can learn from you?
I think first of all, I would say it's a lot, but I'll just summarize: anchor your career and have a clear value proposition to yourself and to any business that you want to operate within. And if the system does not allow that, challenge it and find ways. Don't give up. It's important to really deepen your experiences. and continue to grow. The second element is humility, because I found that people who are arrogant deprive themselves an opportunity for growth. I recognize and I look at how I pivoted in BP from finance to business. It will be an operator of a refinery who will invest his time to take me through their business. It's the ability for me to ask stupid questions, and through those I learn, and the team also learn. So how do you enable yourself to be able to that? And thirdly, don't externalize issues. You know, if I look at the problems of South Africa, I'll probably become an alcoholic. But if I look at the opportunity for South Africa and what I can make a difference and hope that those will connect, I'll become a better person. So maybe those are the three that I'll leave you with.
Okay. 3 is enough. We keep it nice and succinct. Priscillah, thank you so much. Thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you very much for making time to share these powerful insights with us this afternoon. Your authenticity, the transparent manner and honesty, the way you've handled this conversation has been truly inspiring. We really, really appreciate that. We also appreciate your leadership, as Maurice said earlier, in another capacity as chair of the advisory board at Wits Business School. So your service goes beyond ESCOM, is also in the higher education space, in the business school. We appreciate that. I'm sure this is not the last time we have this conversation. I'm looking at the comments. There's so many comments and so many questions, some of which I could not get to, but I'm sure we'll have another conversation of this nature as developments progress over time, and we will be in touch about that. Let me thank, an event of this nature, it cannot happen without the participation, first of all, the participants, members of the audience. The turnout has been extremely impressive today. I would like to thank them for not only attending this event, but also participating and sending questions and making comments. We really appreciate that. And we also appreciate those who work behind the scenes to make these events possible, from Sasol, Malebelo, Maputa. She's been, and Debbie van Toonder have been fantastic working with us in such a cordial and cooperative manner. And from the Wits Business School, what we call the usual suspects at Wits Business School, Jane Palnevs, Rutendo Numalo, Tembe Gathachuayo, and Alison Gaylard. And thank you so much for your effort in making this a successful event. Perhaps we have 2 minutes. I'll ask Maurice to say a few words, and then that should be the end of the event. Thank you very much, Priscillah. We really appreciate your time and your insights.
No, thank you, Maurice. I'll continue to learn, and I'm sure I'll reflect on some of this as well and take my own personal learnings. Okay, I don't like these platforms. It's a growth for me and the anxiety as well. But thanks for it. It's been great.
I think let's give Priscillah a round of applause. I have learned a lot myself, and Priscillah, you continue to inspire me, inspire my daughters, inspire millions of young men and women in this nation. So we are rooting for you. You can count on our support as the WBS, and continue the good work that you're doing as a source of inspiration. Also like to thank Bra Mills. He has already thanked everybody, but we need to thank him. Let's give him a round of applause for the great work that he has done. And I'd like to I don't know whether you can see it. Earlier on, I told you that he's an author, and that's his book. And I recommend it. Priscillah, this will be my gift to you as a way of thanking you for participating. So Tembega, please get a copy of this book and send it to Priscillah. as a way of a token of our appreciation. Thank you very much. All the participants and everyone who's supporting us, stay safe, stay healthy, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.